What if the past we inherited is missing its most extraordinary pieces? History, as we learn it, is a careful architecture, one shaped by textbooks, timelines, and the clean symmetry of progress. But every so often, something breaks through. A strange object, a forgotten record, a quiet anomaly that doesn't fit the story we've agreed upon. These are the artifacts that speak not in words, but in riddles. They sit in locked vaults, buried archives, or desert sands, whispering of a past we were never taught. This story begins not with conspiracy, but with curiosity. A curiosity that asks, what if we've mistaken the limits of human civilization? What if the boundaries of time and technology are not where we thought they were? What if we've never truly been alone? And across continents and centuries, 10 such anomalies have surfaced, each an artifact that defies explanation. A screw embedded in stone hundreds of millions of years too early. A crystal skull that pulses with light and responds to touch. A metal that remembers its shape after being crushed. None of these should exist, and yet they do. But perhaps what's more unsettling than their existence is their quiet erasure. These objects, recovered by archaeologists, discovered by accident, or unearthed by miners, have a strange habit of vanishing into the shadows. Classified, sealed, forgotten. The reasons vary, but the result is the same: silence. Still, a handful of researchers, scientists, and witnesses have come forward, offering glimpses into the forbidden rooms where such artifacts are studied. Their testimonies paint a picture of a hidden history, one where ancient civilizations wielded impossible technology, where materials bear isotopic signatures from other stars, and where quantum mechanisms hide inside relics believed to be thousands of years old. It's tempting to dismiss all this as fantasy, a misreading of data, a trick of the light. But as we follow this trail of objects, 10 in total, each stranger than the last, a pattern emerges. And with it, a deeper question. If these things are real, what does that make of us? This documentary is not about proving a theory. It's about exploring a possibility. A possibility that human history may be far older, far stranger, and far more connected to the cosmos than we've dared to imagine. Over the next 13 chapters, we will journey from the windswept deserts of New Mexico to the jungles of Costa Rica, from Greek shipwrecks to Chinese mountains, listening to the stories these forbidden artifacts are still trying to tell. Not to sensationalize, but to listen, to wonder, to remember that history is not just what is recorded, but what is lost, and sometimes what is hidden. This is not about aliens or conspiracies. This is about the edge of knowledge, where what we think we know begins to unravel. It's about time, and memory, and the traces left behind by something, or someone, watching long before we arrived. So let us begin, with 10 objects and one impossible story. A story that asks, what if the future was once the past? And what if that future is still waiting for us to remember it? It began with a crash in the desert, Roswell, New Mexico, July 1947. A rancher discovers strange debris scattered across the landscape. Fragments unlike anything he'd seen before. Metallic, feather-light, yet impossible to dent. The military arrives within hours. They seal off the site, collect every shard, and issue a swift explanation. It was a weather balloon. Case closed. But not for those who held the pieces in their hands. Among them was Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer sent to recover the wreckage. Marcel wasn't prone to fantasy. He was a trained observer. Yet what he found defied belief. The metal was stronger than steel, lighter than aluminum, and possessed an eerie quality. It couldn't be cut, burned, or destroyed. And when crumpled, it unfolded back into its original form, as if remembering its shape. This was no balloon. What Marcel found would later be known among researchers as memory metal, a material with self-healing, shape-retaining, and adaptive properties, decades ahead of any known alloy. But the trail didn't end in the desert. It led to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where classified tests revealed molecular structures that ignored the laws of earthbound metallurgy. Isotopic ratios suggested a stellar origin, pointing to an environment outside our solar system. Inside its crystalline structure, there were signs of nanotechnology, embedded intelligence that responded to electromagnetic fields and even adjusted properties like conductivity and color on command. This wasn't just a material, it was a technology. Dr. Anthony Corso, who worked in the Foreign Technology Division, later described it as centuries ahead of anything humanity could produce. Some believed it was the source of inspiration for modern composite materials and shape memory alloys. But the original fragments, the ones that couldn't be replicated, were never released to the public. They remain under the highest classification, locked away, studied in silence. Why? Because they challenge everything, not just about what crashed in the desert, but about what is possible. If a material like this existed in 1947, where did it come from? Who made it? And why was it here? The Roswell memory metal isn't just a relic. It is an open question wrapped in secrecy. A question that casts a long shadow over the narrative of human innovation. It reminds us that sometimes what we call discovery is merely the public unveiling of something already known by a select few. And it raises a haunting possibility that technologies far beyond our own have touched this earth, not in the distant future, but in our past. The question remains, not whether we are alone, but how long we've been sharing space with something greater than ourselves. In the shifting sands of Roswell, buried beneath decades of denial, lies a fragment of that truth. And if metal can remember, perhaps so can we. Iraq, 1936. In the dusty remnants of an ancient village near Baghdad, German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig unearthed something that seemed absurd: clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods. At first glance, they resembled simple storage vessels, but once filled with an acidic liquid, they produced a faint electric charge. These were no ordinary artifacts. They were batteries, nearly 2,000 years old. Dubbed the Baghdad batteries, they rewrote the timeline of electrical discovery. But what remained hidden from public view was even more extraordinary. Classified experiments conducted decades later revealed that these jars, when properly configured, could produce stable electrical currents for months. When linked in series, they generated voltage on par with modern low-voltage systems. A discovery that, if true, would place electrical engineering thousands of years ahead of schedule. Dr. Ara Grecht of the Hildesheim Museum led much of this off-the-record research. What he found was baffling. The copper cylinders contained microscopic wire networks, impossibly intricate for any known ancient tools. No signs of corrosion, no degradation. The alloys included rare earth elements not found in the region, elements with isotopic signatures inconsistent with earthly origins. But the batteries were only the beginning. Further excavations, quickly sealed off from public access, revealed underground chambers laced with copper wires stretching for kilometers. A forgotten grid, a system that may have powered something or communicated with something. We don't know. The precision of the metals, the endurance of the materials, the understanding of electrochemical processes. It was all wrong for the time period. Modern science didn't begin exploring electricity in earnest until the 18th century. Yet here it was, humming quietly in the shadows of antiquity, encoded in terracotta and copper. Could the ancient world have possessed electricity? Not as myth or legend, but as engineering? The evidence doesn't ask us to believe. It simply exists, waiting for us to ask the right questions. Why did this knowledge vanish? Where did it come from? And why do traces of it keep surfacing in places where they have no business being? The Baghdad batteries remain under restricted study, their existence acknowledged, but their implications dismissed. Yet they point to something larger, a fragment of a forgotten system, an echo of a civilization with knowledge we've only just begun to reclaim. Perhaps the greatest discovery of all is not the artifacts themselves, but the realization that history may be a cycle, and we are not its first engineers. What was the current flowing through those ancient wires? Power? Communication? Or a signal meant to be received? One we still haven't learned how to hear. A shipwreck off the coast of Antikythera, Greece. Barnacles cling to shattered amphorae. Bronze coins lie in sand like forgotten stars. And among the ruins, something impossible, a rusted mechanism, its gears locked in silence for 2,000 years. At first, it was thought to be an ancient calendar, or perhaps a primitive astronomical tool. But the more scientists examined the so-called Antikythera mechanism, the stranger it became. X-rays revealed a dense array of interlocking gears, over 100 in total, calibrated with mathematical precision. The gears tracked celestial movements, lunar phases, even eclipses. But the public story stopped there. Classified research, conducted behind closed doors at institutions like CERN, uncovered something far more provocative. Deep within the corroded bronze plates were crystalline structures, components that exhibited behaviors not found in any known classical mechanism. Under extreme magnification, researchers discovered that the device employed principles of quantum entanglement. Turn one gear and another responded instantaneously, regardless of their spatial relationship. Not mechanically linked, but entangled. Dr. Tony Free, a theoretical physicist from University College London, led a covert team tasked with deciphering the quantum aspects of the mechanism. What they found defied time itself. Gear ratios mirrored quantum constants, numbers that wouldn't be discovered for another 1,900 years. Carbon dating told an even stranger tale. While the bronze aged appropriately, trace materials within the mechanism's core tested as only decades old, as if part of the device existed outside normal time. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't just an ancient calculator. It was a computer, a quantum computer, built before the concept of a computer even existed. It could predict astronomical events with uncanny precision, not only in the past but into the future, solar eclipses, planetary alignments, asteroid trajectories that modern astronomers had only recently begun to chart. This wasn't observation. It was foresight. But who could have built such a thing? The machining precision, the quantum responsiveness, the atomic-level engineering, all this centuries before the Industrial Revolution, let alone the information age. The implications were staggering. Either ancient civilizations possessed knowledge we no longer understand, or they were gifted tools from another source, one operating at a level far beyond our own. Today, the Antikythera mechanism sits in a museum display, inert and unassuming. Its most astonishing features never made public. The gears no longer move, but the questions do. Was this device a gift, a message, a mirror of what humanity could become? Or was it something else entirely, a reminder that time, like the sea it was found in, does not always flow in one direction? The deeper mystery isn't how it worked, but why it was made and what it was trying to calculate or prevent. The jungle was quiet, except for the buzz of insects and the slow breath of the earth reclaiming stone. In 1927, deep within the ruins of a collapsed Mayan temple, British explorer F.A. Mitchell Hedges uncovered a single object resting on an altar, a skull carved entirely from clear quartz crystal. It was beautiful, and it was impossible. The Mitchell Hedges crystal skull defied explanation. Carved against the axis of the crystal, something modern tools struggle to do, it showed no signs of tooling, no chisel marks, no imperfections. It mirrored human anatomy with eerie precision down to the microscopic details of the cranial cavity. But what truly shocked researchers was what happened when light passed through it. It danced. Internal pathways, invisible to the naked eye, directed beams with laser-like precision. When illuminated from beneath, the skull cast complex holographic patterns. Optical engineers from Hewlett-Packard studied the skull in the 1970s and quietly concluded that reproducing such a structure with modern equipment would be, in their words, near impossible. But the skull was not alone. Over the following decades, similar skulls surfaced across the world, in Central America, Europe, Asia, all carved from quartz, all with the same perfection. And when brought together in proximity, strange things happened. Pulses of light, synchronizations, harmonic tones. Some emitted faint electromagnetic signals, others appeared to glow from within. It was as if they were communicating. Classified research hinted at something even more astonishing, that these skulls, when activated together, produced holographic star maps. The stellar coordinates they displayed pointed to galaxies and systems that were unknown to astronomy at the time, yet later verified by deep space observation. Some believe the skulls function as a quantum network, a kind of interlinked memory system built not by hand but by design far beyond our own, and perhaps far beyond our planet. Spectroscopic tests revealed trace elements that do not exist in Earth's crust. Isotopic signatures matched those theoretically found in neutron stars, remnants of celestial bodies millions of light-years away. Even more curious, the skulls responded differently depending on who touched them. Emotional states, mental focus, even intentions seemed to alter their glow. They behaved not like machines, but like something alive, something aware. To this day, no one knows how the skulls were carved, who made them, or why. Some sit in museums, others in private collections. A few are rumored to be hidden in secure labs, their secrets studied in silence. Perhaps they are tools. Perhaps they are remnants of an ancient communication system. Or perhaps they are warnings, reminders left by a civilization that understood time, space, and consciousness in ways we have yet to grasp. The crystal skulls challenge not only our understanding of ancient craftsmanship, but of what it means to know, to remember, to connect. And they raise a deeper question. If thought can shape crystal, what shaped us? High in the mountains along the China-Tibet border, in caves untouched for millennia, a discovery was made in 1938 that would challenge the very foundation of human history. Stone discs. Hundreds of them. Each disc was roughly 2 feet across, with a hole at the center and a spiral groove etched into the surface. At first, they were dismissed as burial markers or ceremonial objects. But closer examination revealed something extraordinary. The grooves were not decorative. They were text. Microscopic hieroglyphs, carved so finely that magnification was required to even read them. In the early 1960s, Soviet linguist Dr. Sergei Ledov was granted access to a subset of these stones. What he uncovered was not mythology, but science. Equations, schematics, and descriptions of technologies that shouldn't have existed 12,000 years ago. The texts described propulsion systems using magnetic fields, spacecraft architecture, and genetic modification protocols designed for planetary colonization. These were not religious artifacts, they were technical manuals. The discs, now known as the Dropa stones, spoke of a people who arrived from the stars, marooned on Earth in the distant past. The hieroglyphs told of crash landings, adaptation, and interbreeding. They hinted at a cosmic diaspora, a civilization scattering across space, leaving fragments of its knowledge behind. Geological dating confirmed the stones' antiquity. Over 12,000 years old, they predated written language by millennia. Yet they described DNA splicing, gravity manipulation, and interstellar navigation with uncanny accuracy. Some even depicted star maps, not constellations from Earth's night sky, but the view from deep space. Classified tests uncovered more layers. When subjected to electromagnetic current, the disks emitted faint radio frequencies, as if still transmitting data. Chemical analysis revealed that the stone composition included elements not found in any known Earth geology. Their isotopic ratio suggested an extraterrestrial source, perhaps asteroid fragments or cosmic dust bound into stone. And yet these disks lay buried in silence for thousands of years. Their discovery was never widely publicized. The caves were sealed, the artifacts removed to secure facilities. Official statements denied the more provocative findings, reducing the Drapa stones to mere folklore, but the spiral grooves remain. So do the equations and the mystery they contain. How did Neolithic humans possess knowledge of spaceflight, of molecular biology, of electromagnetic propulsion? They didn't, not on their own. That much is clear. The Drapa stones force us to reconsider the role of transmission in history. Not the oral kind, but technological transmission, knowledge handed down, not by ancestors, but by visitors. Carved not for ceremony, but for record. What else is written in stone, waiting for us to read it? And more importantly, who were the authors? In the dense jungles of southern Costa Rica, scattered like forgotten chess pieces across the landscape, lie nearly 300 massive stone spheres. Some are small enough to cradle in your arms. Others tower over a man's height. But all share one haunting feature. They are nearly perfect, geometrically flawless to within millimeters, and no one knows how or why they were made. Known locally as Las Bolas, these spheres were first documented in the 1930s during the clearing of banana plantations. Workers, thinking them the buried treasure of ancient kings, blew some apart with dynamite. What they found inside was nothing, just stone, but not ordinary stone. Scientific analysis revealed that many were crafted from granodiorite, a rock not native to the region. Some stones were transported from quarries over 50 miles away, requiring a logistical effort seemingly impossible for the pre-Columbian societies that once lived there. But transportation is only the beginning. When researchers from MIT conducted classified studies in the 1970s, they discovered something deeply unsettling. Ground-penetrating radar revealed that many of the larger spheres contained internal structures, geometric cores made of denser materials arranged in symmetrical patterns. They were not carved, but engineered. Even stranger, the spheres emitted ultrasonic vibrations when exposed to certain sound frequencies. These vibrations followed mathematical harmonics too precise to be accidental. Some scientists hypothesized the spheres functioned as resonant devices, possibly for communication or something more elusive. Their placement across the terrain told another story. Mapped from above, the spheres' locations align with stellar constellations, but not as seen from Earth. The alignments match orbital perspectives, as if charted from space. The configuration resembles a terrestrial star map, too vast and too exact for primitive skywatchers to have crafted unaided. Then came the gravitational anomalies. Measurements taken near the largest spheres revealed slight but measurable shifts in local gravity. Objects weighed marginally less. The effect was small but consistent. Some began to theorize the spheres could bend space-time on a microscale, a property no stone should possess. The material composition added more fuel to the mystery. Isotopic analysis revealed mineral ratios inconsistent with Costa Rican geology, suggesting the stone was not formed on Earth, or at least not on this part of it. Who made them? No one knows. Indigenous legends speak of gods who moved mountains and shaped the earth. But the spheres bear no cultural markings, no script, no iconography, just perfection. They sit now in courtyards, gardens, and museums, their original purpose long erased. But in their silence they still speak, of knowledge lost, of craftsmanship unmatched, of a message encoded in shape, in vibration, in position. Perhaps the spheres were never meant to be opened, only understood. And in their roundness they offer a quiet metaphor that truth, like the horizon, is not a line to reach, but a circle to return to again and again until something ancient finally comes full. From high above the Peruvian desert, the land reveals itself like a scroll, etched with lines, spirals, and creatures stretching for miles. The Nazca Lines. For centuries, they were dismissed as simple geoglyphs, ceremonial art or tribal symbols only visible from the sky. But the real mystery lies beneath the surface. In the 1970s, classified research supported by NASA uncovered anomalies that the public never heard about. Ground-penetrating radar showed that many of the longest lines, perfectly straight across rugged terrain, were etched with a precision that rivaled modern surveying. They cut across hills, valleys, and ridges with no deviation, impossible to lay down without aerial perspective or satellite guidance. But that wasn't all. Beneath the desert crust, engineers discovered electromagnetic patterns, subsurface structures that amplified radio signals. When tested, some geoglyphs emitted focused beams of electromagnetic energy detectable from orbit. Not static echoes, but directed signals. In other words, these weren't just drawings. They were functioning systems. Dr. Maria Rajka, a lifelong researcher of the Nazca culture, theorized that the lines might serve astronomical functions. But deeper analysis suggested something even more daring, a navigation grid, a network of landing pathways aligned with water sources, mineral deposits, and energy nodes. When energized with certain frequencies, parts of the desert floor exhibited surface fusion, layers of earth transformed into a glassy substance, as if seared by intense heat. Directed energy. Electromagnetic resonance. A desert that functioned as a beacon or a runway. But for what? Some geoglyphs depict stylized animals, a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey. But others are pure geometry. Perfect trapezoids, spirals, and arrows pointing nowhere, or perhaps pointing upward, to something watching from above. Spectral analysis of the soil revealed radiation signatures incompatible with any known natural source. Isotopes in the dirt suggested exposure to high-frequency energy fields, as though the ground itself had once been used in technological processes far beyond ancient capability. And then there were the alignments. Some lines correspond not just to solar events, but to star systems, as if charting entry points, exits, or pathways for flight. The precision of spherical trigonometry used in the layouts suggests a working knowledge of Earth's curvature, knowledge humanity didn't possess until centuries after the Nazca vanished. Today, the Nazca Lines remain protected, yet under-examined. Tourists fly over in small planes. Researchers walk carefully along the edges. But the truth remains just underfoot, not erased, but encoded. Were these lines signals to the sky? Maps for those who came, or for those who might return? Or perhaps they were never meant for us at all. The silence of the desert is deceptive. Beneath the dust, the geometry hums, waiting for the right frequency, the right eye, the right moment. A message written not in language, but in light, in line, and in the longing to be seen from far, far away. In 1974, on the banks of the Mureș River in Romania, construction workers unearthed something wedged between layers of fossilized bones. The remains of a mastodon, and beside them, a metallic object that didn't belong. It was shaped like a wedge, nearly 8 inches long, made of aluminum. Aluminum in 1974 was nothing extraordinary. But this artifact was found beneath sediments dated to at least 20,000 years old, long before the metal had ever been isolated by humans. In fact, aluminum as we know, it wasn't refined until the 19th century. And yet here it was, resting beside the remains of extinct megafauna, untouched for tens of thousands of years. Dubbed the aluminum wedge of Aiud, the object baffled Romanian scientists. Initial analysis revealed it was composed of over 80% pure aluminum alloyed with copper, zinc, and other trace elements, a composition more in line with aerospace manufacturing than primitive metallurgy. But it was the machining marks that defied belief. Microscopic inspection showed smooth surfaces, clean edges, and tool marks consistent with high-speed industrial cutting. The tolerances were too fine for any known ancient culture. This wasn't hand-forged. It was milled, likely with equipment that wouldn't exist until the advent of computer-guided machining. X-ray crystallography revealed a molecular structure suggesting rapid cooling at extreme temperatures, far beyond what early furnaces could produce. The metal hadn't aged either. Unlike typical aluminum, which oxidizes rapidly, this wedge retained a metallic sheen, as if treated with a coating unknown to modern corrosion science. And then came the isotopic tests. The ratios didn't match any known Earth source. The aluminum contained isotopes that hinted at formation in high radiation environments, the kind found only in stars. The material was, quite literally, extraterrestrial in origin. The wedge's aerodynamic shape and structural design suggested it was not decorative. Engineers speculated it may have been part of a larger mechanical assembly, perhaps a component in a vehicle or machine subjected to high stress, high velocity, and extreme temperatures. It was as if something had fallen from the sky. Some dismissed it as a hoax. Others suggested it had fallen from an aircraft and simply embedded into older sediment layers, an accidental intrusion. But the surrounding fossil evidence remained undisturbed. The context was clear. The wedge had been there for millennia. It now sits in a museum, partially hidden from view. No official conclusions have been drawn, no theories published in mainstream journals. But those who've studied it quietly acknowledge it should not exist. The wedge is more than just an anomaly. It's a contradiction between what we believe about the past and what the past sometimes insists on showing us. And in that contradiction, we're left with a choice: dismiss the impossible or ask a more uncomfortable question. What kind of intelligence was shaping metal before we even began shaping thought? Russia, 1998. In the remote Kurgan region, a team of geologists surveying ancient rock formations made a discovery that seemed laughably out of place. A tiny, coiled object embedded in stone over 300 million years old. A screw. Barely a millimeter in length, the object appeared to be a threaded spiral, unmistakably manufactured. But the rock encasing it predated the age of the dinosaurs, formed during a time when life on Earth had not yet taken complex shapes. The sample was sent to the Russian Academy of Sciences. There, under high-powered electron microscopes, the details came into sharp relief. The threads were uniform, geometrically perfect, and cut with precision at a scale beyond human ability. Not only was this a screw, it was a nanotechnological marvel. Made of tungsten, one of the hardest metals known, with a melting point over 3,000 degrees Celsius, the object presented another impossibility. Tungsten is difficult to work with even using today's most advanced industrial methods. Creating threads at this scale, in this material, would require tools and control systems operating at atomic precision, which is exactly what the analysis suggested. Dr. Yuri Golov, one of the metallurgists on the team, noted that the tungsten's crystal structure showed signs of controlled atomic assembly, not formed by natural processes, manufactured, and deliberately so. Further tests revealed isotopic signatures inconsistent with Earth's natural formation. The ratios of tungsten isotopes hinted at stellar origin, forged not in terrestrial mines, but in the aftermath of supernovae. And this screw was not alone. Over the following years, similar artifacts were found in other locations, each embedded in ancient rock, each impossibly old, and each constructed with a degree of precision no human technology can yet match. Their global distribution suggested intent, not accident, not contamination. Some theorized that they were remnants of probes, microscopic machines seeded into the earth long before life began. Sentinels, recorders, observers. If so, the implications are staggering. They suggest not only a non-human intelligence, but one that operates on timelines we cannot fathom. Not centuries or millennia, but geological epochs. Intelligence that leaves behind not monuments, but molecules. Not cities, but circuits. Silent, waiting, embedded in the bedrock of time. Today, these microscopic screws remain locked in state archives, their existence rarely acknowledged in official literature. But those who've seen them understand they are not artifacts. They are evidence. Evidence that Earth has been watched, perhaps even seeded, by intelligences that do not build with stone or fire, but with atoms and stars. And in their quiet perfection, these screws ask a question more haunting than any monument ever could. What if we are not the first engineers of Earth, but the inheritors of a world long prepared for our arrival? South Africa, 1996. Deep within a mine carved through Precambrian rock over 2 billion years old, workers unearthed a metallic sphere, smooth, unblemished, and impossibly precise. It was about 4 inches in diameter, perfectly round, with 3 symmetrical grooves etched around its equator. No one could explain how such an object came to be embedded in geological layers that predate complex life by 1 billion years. But the sphere didn't just sit silently. When placed in a sealed display case, it began to rotate, slowly, continuously, and without any visible force. Every 128 hours, it completed a full turn. Scientists checked for air currents, magnetic fields, and environmental interference. None could account for the motion. It was as if the sphere was alive, responding to something, or functioning on its own timetable. Then came the electromagnetic readings. Dr. Roloff Marx, a physicist from the University of the Witwatersrand, recorded fluctuating electromagnetic fields emanating from the sphere. Patterns emerged, not random but complex, structured, as if encoding information. The fields pulsed more intensely when humans approached, as though the object could sense presence or intention. Attempts to damage the sphere failed. Scratches healed within hours. Drilled samples regenerated. Even when subjected to extreme heat and pressure, the material adapted, resisting alteration. Metallurgical analysis revealed a structure unlike any known alloy. Isotopes within the sphere didn't match any natural composition found on Earth. Some elements seemed to exist in stabilized forms considered impossible under current nuclear physics. X-ray tomography unveiled a hidden world inside. At the core of the sphere were patterns, intricate, repeating geometries smaller than virus particles. Nanotechnological machines? Or something even more advanced? The internal structure appeared to function as a system, constantly shifting and maintaining balance. A self-contained mechanism, operating without fuel or decay. And then there were the signals. Researchers detected faint emissions, too weak to register on standard equipment, but carrying unmistakable structure, as if the sphere were transmitting. But to whom? No known technology could replicate the sphere's properties. It resisted reverse engineering. Its purpose remains speculative. A beacon, a data archive, a probe, or perhaps a seed, planted long before us, waiting for intelligence to emerge. The sphere now rests in a classified facility, studied in isolation. No definitive answers have been released. But among the scientists who've interacted with it, one consensus is shared quietly. This is not a relic of Earth. It is an object placed with intention. An artifact not of time, but of timing. It didn't just survive billions of years, it endured for a reason. And in its rotation, Its hum, its refusal to be broken, it offers a silent message. That intelligence, real intelligence, may not shout or conquer. It waits. It watches. And when the time is right, it moves. What else, buried in the bones of the planet, is waiting to turn? In a quiet vault beneath Baghdad, sealed away from public view, rests an artifact that redefines everything we think we know about ancient science. It is a battery, or at least that's what we call it. Discovered in 1936 by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, the original terracotta jar contained a copper cylinder and an iron rod. When filled with an acidic liquid, it produced electricity. For decades, it was dismissed as a curiosity, an accidental precursor to modern chemistry. But the Baghdad battery, as we've come to know it, held deeper secrets. Classified studies revealed that the device could sustain a consistent electrical charge for months. Not only that, but when several were connected in series, they generated voltages nearly identical to contemporary electrical grids. They weren't rudimentary, they were refined. And then came the wires. Hidden chambers beneath the archaeological site revealed a buried network, copper pathways stretching across the terrain, connecting chambers and artifacts like veins beneath ancient skin. It was not a shrine. It was a system. A primitive power grid, only it wasn't primitive at all. X-rays of the copper cylinders uncovered microscopic wiring, coiled with such precision that even modern metallurgists were baffled. The wires showed no signs of corrosion despite being buried for millennia. Their alloy composition included rare earth elements not native to the region, with isotopic markers suggesting origins beyond Earth. Further excavation was halted. The site was closed. The artifacts quietly removed to undisclosed locations. The official narrative remained unchanged, but those who had seen the evidence couldn't forget. Why would a Bronze Age civilization develop complex energy storage? What were they powering or transmitting? Were these batteries part of a larger system, a communication grid, a technology forgotten, or perhaps never fully understood by those who inherited it? And the most troubling question, who gave them this knowledge? There's no record of electrical theory in Mesopotamian texts, no mention of copper conduits or electrochemical reactions, just the batteries themselves, silent, sealed, and precise. Some scientists now believe they weren't standalone devices at all. They were nodes, pieces of a global system, fragments of a technological legacy too advanced to be understood in isolation. The Baghdad batteries challenge the belief that history is a straight line. They suggest it's something more like a wave, rising and falling, knowledge gained and lost. And in that cycle, we must ask, did we discover electricity, or did we remember it? And if the light once flickered in ancient temples, who first struck the spark? The question of presence, of whether we've ever truly been alone, may find its clearest echo not in the skies, but in the artifacts left quietly behind. 10 objects, 10 riddles carved in metal, stone, and light, each discovered in a different corner of the world, each studied, analyzed, and eventually hidden, not because they were understood, but because they weren't. The Roswell memory metal that reshaped itself against the rules of metallurgy. The Dropa stones inscribed with star maps and genetic blueprints. The crystal skulls that responded to thought. The Antikythera device, ticking with quantum breath in a bronze heart. These are not isolated events. They are a pattern of intervention or inheritance. Taken together, they suggest a hidden layer of human history, one not captured in textbooks or timelines. A layer where knowledge arrived too soon, where metallurgy preceded smelting, where flight predated wings, where computing emerged in the age of gears. All of it points toward one unsettling conclusion, that Earth has been touched, watched, seeded, by intelligences far older and more advanced than we are prepared to admit. Yet the greater mystery may not lie in the artifacts themselves, but in their erasure. Time and again these discoveries vanish into the margins, sealed by governments, denied by institutions, lost in silence, as if some quiet agreement had been made to protect us from the implications, or perhaps to protect something else. But the artifacts endure, in labs and bunkers, in museums and private vaults. They hum softly beneath our world, waiting to be understood or remembered. For what they represent is not just lost technology. They are mirrors. They show us what we might become, or what we once were, or what something else still is. Some call this forbidden knowledge. But knowledge is never truly forbidden, only feared. And perhaps what we fear most is not the presence of others, but the possibility that we are not the first, that our climb was not from darkness, but from memory. And now, as our own technology begins to mirror the strange capabilities of these relics, as we dabble in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and spaceflight, we must ask, are we rediscovering a path once walked long ago? Are we the return? The final chapter waits, not in the next artifact, but in what we choose to do with the truth already before us. We stand at the edge of remembering, and the question that remains is not, who were they? But who are we now that we know? Across time, across continents, across layers of earth and silence, a thread weaves through the human story. Not a straight thread, not a clean one, but unmistakable in its presence. 10 artifacts, each defying explanation, each asking questions older than history itself. What we've explored is not just a mystery of objects. It's a mystery of identity, of origin, of memory, and perhaps of destiny. The Roswell debris, technology that reshaped itself like liquid thought. The Baghdad batteries and their buried circuits. The crystal skulls that pulse like neural nodes in a forgotten network. The tungsten screw embedded in stone from a time before time. The Costa Rican spheres, as precise as stars. The living metal sphere, quietly turning as if it remembers something we've forgotten. These are not mistakes. They are markers. They hint at a civilization, or civilizations, not lost, but hidden, not primitive, but post-technological, perhaps human, perhaps not, perhaps something that once was both. What unites these anomalies is not just their strangeness, but their silence, how quickly they are dismissed, how quietly they are locked away. And yet here they are, whispering through the cracks in consensus. We began this journey with a question. What if we've mistaken the limits of our past? Now the question is deeper. What if these objects were never meant to be understood, only to be found? What if they are messages, seeded across time, not to guide, not to save, but to awaken? To remind us that the arc of history is not always upward, that it curves, returns, loops, that we are not at the beginning, not even near it, and that our tools, our science, our digital dreams, are echoes. In these echoes we glimpse something more than history. We glimpse the shape of potential, the scaffolding of futures forgotten or abandoned, the architecture of intelligence not confined to species or planets, but to principles of curiosity, of wonder, of creation. So what do we do now? Do we bury these truths again for the comfort of our timelines? Do we wait until the next artifact demands our attention? Or do we listen? The artifacts are not just evidence of contact. They are reminders of continuity, that knowledge lost can be knowledge found, that progress isn't linear but layered, that perhaps in some deep way we are not just learning what others once knew, we are remembering what it means to be part of something vast, ancient, and awake. In the end, the most forbidden discovery may not be the technology buried in stone. It may be the realization that we were never alone and never will be.